Welcome everybody to Safe Practices for the home inspectors. Like AJ said, we're going to go over some situations where you want to keep yourself safe and continue inspecting without any injuries and stuff like that. So, my name is Rob Byrne, certified master inspector here in New York in the Long Island area. I guess AJ later will share all my contact information. We'll try to pull up a slide if anybody has any other questions after the webinar. Feel free to get in touch with me and reach out. As you know, as inspectors, we're always driving all over the place, so we always have time to jump on a phone call to help anybody out that might have questions. So I guess we'll get it started. AJ will monitor the Q&A and he'll pop up questions at the end like he said. And please feel free to ask any question. It's helpful to understand where everybody's knowledge base is, and we can talk about anything that you folks need to know about. So getting started. Introduction to safe practices for the home inspector. Starts out with knowledge and application. Clearly, the way it states, safety starts with understanding potential hazards and applying the knowledge during every inspection. In other words, you assess the situation. If it doesn't look like it's a safe situation, don't do it. But the most important thing is to document if you don't do something in your report writing. So we're going to defer to report writing quite a bit during the presentation, because it's important. If you can't get to a hidden space or a crawl space that's dangerous, we're going to go through a bunch of slides and pictures of tough situations. But the key takeaway here is to understand that you have to document if you don't do something and the reason why. So we're talking about safe practices tonight because it's most likely it's going to be a safety concern. So the next topic, obviously, personal responsibility. Without no regulation or oversight, inspectors must take full responsibility for their own safety. So in other words, we're not sanctioned by OSHA or anybody like that. So we have to use our common sense and knowledge to understand not to get in that situation. So it's basically a personal type of thing. I know a lot of people don't walk roofs. They don't want to walk roofs. You don't have to walk a roof as a home inspector for a lot of reasons. If it's unsafe, you don't want to do it. If you're by yourself, the whole bit. But going back to that topic, just document it in your report what you did and what you didn't do. So if you're not walking the roof, which you're not required to walk the roof, it's okay, but just state it in your report. State the fact. Did not walk roof for whatever reason, wind, rain, it doesn't matter, but state how you observed that roof. So in other words, if you did it through, binoculars or from the roof's edge on a ladder or anything like that, just document what you did. Recognize hazards, learn to identify unsafe situations, and have the discipline to avoid or stop work when risks are too high. Just like we're talking about, if you're not comfortable walking on a roof, don't walk it. If the crawl space that you're going to enter in has moisture and asbestos and it's dark and dingy, you don't have to go in there, but you do have to document why you didn't go in there. Just say unsafe condition, or maybe the opening's too small, or you didn't have access to it. Again, just document it. And if you do go in there, make sure you use the proper equipment. You'll see in this photo, in this illustration, somebody has a full body suit on. They have a cone. Maybe they put it out to show that somebody's in there. Signage is always good to show. That's the signage on the left, so you could see that. Full respirator, hood, goggles, glasses. Protect yourself. If you're going to go in there, don't go in without this PPE stuff. So that's important to make sure, because there's a lot of hazards in crawl spaces. Use proper equipment. Make sure your equipment is in good condition and you know how to use them correctly before starting the inspection. If you are going to go into a crawl space, make sure you have backup lights because it never fails when you get it on the other side of the crawl space and you're using your flashlight, it dies or whatever. You don't want to be in that situation. Backup cameras or whatever you're doing to document what you're doing in the crawl space, looking for deficiencies. That's if you go in the crawl space. Be aware of conditions. Stay alert to hidden changes, hazards. In other words, if you're going to walk a roof and it's starting to get windy, be aware of the conditions, anything that's going on. Um, know your limits. That's exactly what we're talking about. If you're not comfortable walking on the roof or you're not comfortable going into a crawl space, just document why. But you can always look in there. You can always, inspect it from the hatch. Same thing with attics. State the fact that you're inspecting the attic from the roof, yeah, from the access hatch. You could set up a ladder, go up, peek your head in there. You don't have to enter. You'll see um, a lot of things that you have to document on. You want to document the condition of the structure and stuff of that nature. But just state in your report everything you're doing so it's known. And same thing in your pre-inspection agreement. If you're not going to walk a roof, you know, state the fact the roof will be inspected from the ground with a drone, with binoculars, however you're going to do it. Um, state your state what you're doing and not doing in your pre-inspection agreement. Um, so um, that this is what we were talking about. If your business is required by law to comply with OSHA, um, I'm not sure, maybe a company is, I'm not sure, but we're not sanctioned by OSHA. Um, it's good to comply with the OSHA regulations because they're there for your safety. And just a lot of common sense um, with following that stuff. Um, Inspector's liability, scope of inspection. Liability is generally limited to what's defined in the inspection agreement and industry standards. Visual, non-invasive. Inspectors can be held liable if they go beyond or fail to meet the scope. You definitely want to meet the scope, whether you're following your state SOPs or InterNACHI. You want to kind of follow it. You could go beyond it. They're saying you could be held liable if they go beyond it, but I think you're just doing your work. If you follow the bare minimums of the SOP, it doesn't feel like you're doing much. But that's your decision as the home inspector. It's your business whether you follow the letter of the law of the SOPs or you go above and beyond. Well, me personally, go above and beyond. It just shows your client that you're going above and beyond. So definitely something to consider. Contractual limitations. Inspector may use contracts with limitations of liability. Yeah, now they're talking about what you're going to put in your pre-inspection agreement. Um, Often capping damages to inspection fee through enforceability varies by state. So you have to figure out what your state limits you to or certain things in your pre-inspection that you have to follow the state regulation. So that's good to understand what you're putting in your pre-inspection agreement. We're talking about safety, but contractual limitations is a safety thing too because you don't want to get jammed up with legal stuff. Omissions and misrepresent. Inspector can face liability for errors, omissions, or false statements in the report that led to financial loss or safety issues for the client. So what we're saying here is that we do face liabilities if you miss something that you should have caught. Um, that's a liability, and everybody, you don't have to have E&O insurance. You just have to have your general liability. But if you're going to pursue this as a career or anything, if you're doing an inspection on a house, it's good to have this E&O insurance. Again, check your insurance carrier. InterNACHI has excellent uh, insurance for the home inspectors with the E&O. I would reach out to whoever's in your area or InterNACHI and just talk to them. They'll give you the knowledge base that you need for the proper insurance coverage while you're doing inspections. Because we have big responsibility when we go out there and do inspections. So it's important to have these additional insurance. Also additional insured. We're not going to get into that kind of stuff, but I would 100% talk to your insurance carrier or like I said, Joe heads the InterNACHI insurance, so you can always reach out to any of the representatives and find out more in detail what we're talking about. I think it's very, very important to have the proper insurance, and again, go above and beyond the insurance. Just make sure you're covered. InterNACHI standards of practice. Some examples for residential standards of practice designed to promote personal safety. Um, Again, this is the InterNACHI SOP. You can follow it for safety reasons. Any systems that are shut down, you're not going to turn them on. You don't know why they're shut down. Just leave them in the off position unless the homeowner's home. And some people shut down their heating system in the summertime because that's what they do. So the emergency switch is off and they just have it off because that's what they do. You can ask the homeowner if you want to turn it on to check the heat, but you don't have to check anything that's shut down. Um, any shut-off valves or manual stops. We're talking about like the shut-off valves underneath the sinks and stuff, especially the main water shut-off valve. You don't want to touch any of that because if it freezes up on you and breaks in your hand, you got problems. You don't want to deal with that. Um, we're not required to operate gas valves. Definitely don't turn the gas valves in on position if they're off. Um, they're off probably for a safety reason. Don't get involved with gas. Any of the other valves, just don't operate them for a lot of reasons that we're talking about safety. You don't want things to break off in your hand, then you can't shut something down. Any electrical disconnects or overcurrent protections. What that means, if you go to a circuit breaker panel and breakers are off, don't turn them on. They're off for a reason. Again, just state in your report these circuit breakers were off at time of inspection. Obviously, state you didn't turn them on. Talk to the homeowner as to why it's off. Just communicate. It's important. If a circuit breaker is off, do not turn it on. Um, any systems that do not function properly, don't turn them on. Just opening up a can of worms. The inspector is not required to enter or access any areas that may, in the opinion of the inspector, be unsafe. We talked about that earlier. If it's an unsafe condition, you definitely don't want to enter into it. Again, document why, take pictures, state the fact. You'll see a couple of pictures from our reports that, we just basically state the fact. Enter all crawl spaces that are unsafe or not readily accessible. We're not required to inspect underground items because we can't see them. Remember, this is a visual and non-invasive inspection. Lawn irrigation systems, underground storage tanks. We don't, test the irrigation system and we state the fact in there. Irrigation system not tested at time of inspection because these things are all on a program. I always say to the client, just have the homeowner demonstrate and go through the zones and what time things go on and that kind of stuff. You don't want to mess with that, and then all of a sudden you get a phone call, homeowners complaining that the irrigation system is not going on at the time that they set it and it's going off in the middle of the day. You don't want to do any of that. So again, state the fact, put it in your pre-inspection agreement. Lawn irrigation systems are not tested at time of inspection. Speak to homeowner regarding irrigation system zones, etc. Just kind of put it in your own words, but that's a good thing to put in your pre-inspection agreement. 2.2, do anything which the inspector's opinion is likely to be unsafe or dangerous uh, to the inspector or others. Yep, we talked about that. Walking on roof surfaces, climbing ladders, entering attic spaces, or even, pets. If there's a pet in a room, you're not going to go in there. We're going to get into some safety concerns from the dealing with pets in a house as well. We'll get into a little more of that detail. But again, if you're not going to do something, document it, take a picture, put it in your report. Don't do anything that's unsafe. Um, Opening doors where maybe pets are behind there and you don't know the situation. If the door's closed, ask why, um, and then find out if you can open it and enter in safely. Inspectors not required to walk on any roof surfaces. We talked about that. A lot of things we're going to talk about in advance, and then we're going to see them come up on the slides, and then we'll just make sure we cover the bases. And again, if anybody has questions, drop them in the Q&A, and AJ is going to monitor that. And at the end of the hour, we'll go over some questions and answer questions that you folks have. Again, talked about roof surface, inspect items that are not visible or readily accessible from the ground, including windows and doors, flashing. Again, documented. How are you, inspecting that second floor window? If you're inspecting it from the ground, great. Just again, document it. Again, enter any crawl space that are not accessible or where entry could cause damage or pose hazard to the inspector. That's pretty straightforward. Insert any tools, probes, or devices into the main panel board, subpanel, distribution panel, etc. Yeah, just if you're taking the cover off on an electrical panel, don't stick your fingers in there. If you want to point something out, maybe use a laser pointer or something that's not conductive, just to kind of point to it. Definitely not your finger. We talked about operate electrical systems that are shut down. If they're shut down for a reason or a switch is off, again, take a picture, document it in the report, and just say system was shut down at time of inspection. Activating electrical circuits or bench circuits that are not energized. That's going back to what we were talking about with the circuit breakers. If they're off, do not turn them on. If the homeowner's home, you can ask a question, and sometimes they'll just say, "Oh yeah, I got it off for whatever reason." They'll turn it on, and that's fine as long as they turn it on. Um, Enter the attic or any unfinished spaces that are not readily accessible, where entry could cause damage. We talked about that. Don't enter into a space that's unsafe for a lot of reasons. And again, just document it. Limitation of a home inspection. It's always a topic of conversation to exceed or not to exceed. Um, it's up to you. If you want to follow the SOP to the letter of the law, then do it. Again, that's the bare minimums, standards of practice. So, first comment, meet or exceed the SOP. Every inspector must at least substantially meet the InterNACHI standards of practice. Failure to do so can lead to client claims for breach of contract or misrepresentation. So, what we're saying here is if you're going to follow InterNACHI standards of practice, do everything that's stated in that standards of practice. And you could, if you're using mobile apps, you can put them in as reminders, required items that you have to answer following that standards of practice, which would be like describing the roof material, what it is. There's certain standards of practice that we as home inspectors have to fill out the bare minimum. And again, it's going to be in the SOP. When uncertain about what the SOP requires, inspectors should lean toward exceeding the minimum standard to avoid, it says to avoid legal or reputational harm, understandable. But my feeling is to give the client the information that they need to know about that's required by the SOP. Yes, it's illegal or, your reputation, you want to make sure you do it. But more importantly is that the client knows what they're buying. Risk of overextending, continuously going far beyond the SOP can cause. I guess what we're talking about here is like if you're a plumber and you got to start taking the boiler apart to look at various components in the boiler that us as home inspectors don't normally do because we're not required. But then you might lend yourself to say, well, why didn't you take this apart? Why didn't you get into that more detail? So kind of keep a level playing surface as to what exactly you're going to do for those procedures. If you're going above and beyond for one system, then maybe you should be going above and beyond for other systems. So just think about that. Contractual alignment matters. Most inspectors' contracts specified here to it's exactly what we're talking about. Um, yeah, SOP could create a conflict, but just get into a rhythm. Whatever you normally do it on a consistent basis. If you think it's a problem or you hear feedback, then you go about, making the decision. But um, just do a good job. Personally, I feel you should go above and beyond the SOP because the SOP is bare minimum. So if someone's doing an SOP at a bare minimum and another inspector is doing, a little bit more, for whatever the case may be, maybe that person doesn't mind entering in the crawl space. That's, you know, maybe unsafe, but they're preparing themselves for it. Same thing with the roof. If you're walking on the roof, you don't have to, but you're exceeding the SOP. Um, Stuff to think about. Potential legal implications. Clients may claim an oral agreement or expect a more rigorous inspection if the inspector frequently goes above and beyond the SOP. We talked about that. Depends on what exactly you want to do and how far above the SOP. Duty of care for extra tasks. Once an inspector voluntarily takes on additional tasks beyond the SOP, they are legally obligated to perform those tasks with reasonable care. Um, exactly what we're talking about. If you're a plumber and you're taking the boiler apart and you're really digging in for whatever reason, I don't know, but they're going to expect you to do it on a lot of other systems. Um, this is just an example of how we put it in our report. Um, Age of roof cannot always be known due to material conditions. These are just some limitations that we put in. Inspection limited, prevented by. This is exactly what we were talking about. The day we went here, it was a roof that was wet. So we put down, obviously, we're not going to walk on a roof, it's a wet surface. Um, and lack of access, too high, too slippery. Again, just state the fact in here. And if you see on the bottom, it says inspection performed by, and in this case, this house, we did it from the ground with binoculars. Roof was steep. It was wet, so we didn't walk on it because of safety reasons. And we stated the fact. So, another important thing is when you're writing your report, a lot of times when the roof is wet, it'll hide flaws that you might see when it's dry. So, whenever we have wet surface condition, we always like to put that comment in there. So, food for thought, something for you folks to think about. Um, Now we're talking about structure. It's just some items that we put in there on our reports. Limitations, again, if the basement walls and ceilings are finished, state the fact, you couldn't see it. Again, we're talking about safety backslash having your clients understand what you're doing and why you're doing it. Um, the attic, I don't know, I don't have pictures here, but you'll see pictures probably after that. Attic space entered, but access was limited. Limited accessibility and crawl space due to. Oh, okay. Yep. You're going to see pictures on this one after that. So There you go. Crawl space. Um, Good illustration of we put in first one general view of crawl space. We got in to an extent, but the access was limited. Again, stated the fact. And then why we had limited access because we found that there was actively leaking waste pipes and we had rodent activity. So at that point, no need to go in, just take pictures, document it. And even if, you know, you're not going in, your client sees you making the attempt with pictures and stating the fact. Um, Clearly that we had waste pipe leaking and rodent activity. Um, Go back to that one. This was in the crawl space. So again, you could see on the fourth picture that things were leaking and it was just messy. The main sewer line in the back along that rear wall was leaking. So again, state the facts, take pictures. This is a non-issue. So nobody can say anything that you didn't say this, you didn't say that. You did. You stated the fact and you took pictures. Same thing with the attic. Um, this is just, when we went up in the attic, this is one page from the report. We stated the fact, but underneath it is the reason why we didn't go in that attic is because there was animal and pest droppings in the attic. State the fact, take the pictures. You could see the text over rodent droppings on insulation attic. And then you always, want to state what the client should do. Clearly, it's to clean it. But remember, it's a contamination, so you don't want to just clean it out. You want to disinfect it, that type of thing. So this is a clear example why you would not enter an attic. This was taken from, it was pulled downstairs. We went up and we were able to stand on the stairs and take a picture. Again, when you're going into an attic, respirators, safety goggles, a hat, coveralls, Tyvek suit, something like that. Even if you're crawling around, insulation, attics are 50, 60 years old. They collect dust and stuff like that. You don't know if there was ever asbestos up there, but just protect yourself if you're going to get in and crawl around the attic. But clearly, if you have this situation, you're not going to. Um, Again, this was the crawl space. Um, Stated the fact. Um, there was a leak. Uh, Sewer line was leaking. Drains were leaking. Clear as day. Galvanized drains and crawl space, rusted and leaking. State the fact. Put the pictures. Move on. If you are walking the roof, there's a picture of my son up there. State the fact. If you're walking the roof, get pictures of you on the roof. If you're on the roof and you're by yourself and you're doing an inspection by yourself, put your hand down on the roof. Take a picture of your hand on the roof so people identify that you were on the roof. Get your foot in the picture, that type of thing. So when you're doing it again, you got to state the fact. In fact, in this house, in this house, we walked the roof because it wasn't raining out. Inspection performed by walking on roof. Roof inspected by walking structure. A couple of pictures in there. You did your job. Again, this is going above and beyond the SOPs, but you have to feel what you're comfortable with when you're doing your inspections. Garage, same thing. When you're doing an inspection in the garage, um, talking about safety, but also if you can't get into something stated in the report, this is not really a safety issue, but it's a concern. If you can't get to certain areas and there's something behind there that you can't visually see, whether it's asbestos, rodent droppings, who knows, even termite damage. Um, you want to state the fact and let your client know that, first picture, storage in the shed, that a shed, everything was filled in there. Um, couldn't see much. Same thing with the garage. Car was in the garage. So you want to state the fact. Same thing here with the garage. The ceiling was sheetrocked. The other side of the garage, the ceilings and walls were finished. Again, just document this going back to um, your responsibility. If you can't inspect something, state the fact, show the picture, and let the clients know. And we always recommend to the client that when you do the walkthrough the day, when your client does the walkthrough the day of or the day before closing, these are things that they should look at when everything's entered. You can also offer up your walkthrough services if the client wants to call you back after you did the inspection. Now the house should be empty, and your client's going to do the final walkthrough. It's another ancillary um, service you can provide. Obviously, you're not going to go there for free. You're going to come up with a price that's fair to you and worth your time and effort. And you'll be surprised how many folks want us to come back and do walkthroughs, and we charge them a fee. So something to think about to generate more money. Um, Doing inspections, or offer it up as a walkthrough service the day of or the day before closing. Because remember, you're inspecting this property 30, 45, 60 days prior to them closing, and things change in that period of time. And we let our clients know that this is what happens, as time goes on. Um, the the clients uh, have to do a walkthrough, and check things out. So something you can offer up. Um, Asbestos, talking about hazardous materials, stuff that you want to make sure you're protected from if you're doing an inspection. Um, this is what asbestos is. It's a fibrous material used in many building products. We've gotten away from it over time. Um, it's it's a sound barrier, fire resistant. Uh, we say binder because in some plaster in the walls, there's some asbestos in it, the fibers that, back in the day, they would use that as a binding agent. Thermal insulators, you'll see them on old wires, old cloth wires. Some of them had asbestos in it. Pipe and duct insulation, heating system. That's usually the big one on the old steam heating systems. That big, those big pipes for the heating system. You'll see the white covering on it with the metal straps. Again, usually asbestos, but if you're documenting it in your report, definitely use the word possible. Don't call it out straight up as asbestos because you'll get called out. They'll want to know, did you test it? Did you confirm it's asbestos? So if you know and you're experienced, we've been doing this a long time. When I look at a heating pipe, I tell my client this is asbestos, but when I put it in the report, it's going to say possible asbestos because we didn't test it. But again, inform your clients, let them know, and have the conversation when you're on the inspection with your clients. Um, Old boilers, they were covered in asbestos because they used it as a sealer around the boilers. Some roofing and siding, older asphalt shingle roofs had some asbestos in it. I don't know if they still have it, but it's outside. The siding materials, you have the old fiberboard cement shingles. They, again, may possibly contain asbestos. State the fact. We talked about plaster, drywall, compound, stucco. The old ceiling tiles. If you ever come across the ceiling that has that dimpling effect throughout, usually they used to add some asbestos fibers to kind of keep it as a binding agent and have that effect. Floor tiles, the old 9x9s, back in the day, they were referred to as Kent tiles, Kentile. If you have younger clients, they're going to have no idea what that means. Don't even use the word. If you have older clients, you mention the word, they'll know it. But again, it's usually the 9x9 tiles. If they're 12 by 12, they normally don't have asbestos in it. And again, a lot of times with the tiles, it was the glue that they used back in the day. They would have a little bit of asbestos in there too. But again, you just mention it, bring it to your client's attention. Um, Sheet goods, I guess we were talking about the um, when you would coat the ceiling and have that dimpling effect. Wall and attic insulation. A lot of the older, not a lot, but older insulation, they would have some hazardous materials in it, like the vermiculite and stuff like that. Just understand what it is and document it. Asbestos cement. That's what we were talking about with the heating pipes. They would use it for insulators. Um, Yep. So just be aware of where you might come across asbestos. And of course, we were talking about it, the concern, um, just for your information, and everybody understands why asbestos is a concern. Tiny fibers that cause cancer and lung disease, if inhaled. Um, Fibers are lightweight and can stay airborne for many days. What happens in a situation like this is a lot of times the homeowner will just rip that insulation off of the heating pipes and not realize these things that are airborne. So if you're going into an old house and you're going into a basement that potentially might have had asbestos on the heating pipes, it wouldn't be a bad idea to wear a respirator. If you're going into a house in the 30s, 40s, or 50s, and they have old steam heat, it's a very good possibility that they had asbestos on the heating pipes. And if you go down there and it's not down there anymore, or if it's hanging and it's in that friable condition, you don't want to be inhaling it. So again, have respirators, have masks, have all that stuff with you. So when you go down there in an attic or something, you're protected easily. Yeah, we talked about that friability. Um, when people are doing demo, they don't take the proper precautions to take care of that stuff. So you want to protect yourself. Um, Again, we were talking about it. Can only be confirmed through laboratory testing. So you get to state the word possible, and identifying it as beyond the scope of the home inspection, but you can say um, possible asbestos, possible lead, possible, mold, but just state the fact and use the word possible. Most homes contain some asbestos. Yeah, generally not concerned unless it's materials friable, which means it's airborne and it's disintegrating. Um, leave it alone if it's undisturbed, if it's in an area, if risk exists. Some people enclose it or seal it off. If it's in a crawl space or in heating pipes, sometimes people instead of removing it, they'll encapsulate it. Again, it's all the level of comfort your clients have with it, but just state the fact, show them what it is, put it in your report, and you did your job. Removal is an option. It's expensive. Um, has to be done by the proper professionals, and getting rid of this stuff a lot of times is regulated. So you want to be uh, concerned with that and talk to your clients about that. Uh, a lot of times, what we do is if we see the fact that the house has asbestos on the heating pipes, um, you kind of know they're going to be going up behind the walls. So again, you could have this conversation with your clients and state the fact that being that we have asbestos, or again, possible asbestos on his heating pipes in the basement, there's a good chance that they're going up behind the wall. And if you decide to take a wall down or remove the old plaster and stuff like that, there's a possibility that you would have asbestos on the heating pipes behind the wall. Um, have that conversation with your client and document it in your report that it's a possibility. Um, Applies to boiler replacement, roof and siding work, flooring replacements. A lot of companies, if they come across the fact that it's asbestos and it's dangerous, they might not want to do the job, or they might just upcharge it and say that testing and remediation has to be done because they don't want to be liable for disturbing these environmental concerns. Um, We've been talking about this, not for the do-it-yourselfers when you're dealing with asbestos. Leave it to the professionals. Um, Says right there, homeowners should not attempt asbestos work required trained professionals, follow guidance or regulations, EPA, OSHA. A reputable company that is licensed, they're going to follow these protocols because they're required by their licensing to do it. So that's again, we're talking about safety and environmental concerns. That's the right way of doing it. Um, Good example on an inspection, how we go about um, stating the fact, this actual part of a report. You can see in our report potentially hazardous materials, and again, condition possible asbestos containing materials. Then we give a little brief description of what it is, where it might be found. You could see it right there. Um, Again, as you're writing your report and you're stating the facts in your report, you got to put the implications of why certain things are either a concern or potential mechanical failures. That's your implication. So in this case, it's a health issue, and again, implication and location. Where is it located? Well, it could be in the basement. It could be in the crawl space. Wherever it is, state the fact. Again, when we take our pictures, like we talked about earlier, state the fact. We like to put text over on things and give our recommendation, which in this case is an environmental specialist company to provide cost of removal. Again, possible asbestos on heating pipes and basement. And then we just substantiate what we showed with other pictures in the area. So if you see something like this, we kind of all know it's a good high percentage that it's asbestos, but we can't say it. We have to state the fact, but you could have that conversation with your client that, it's a good chance this is asbestos. Just another hazardous material. Um, they used to use this in foam insulation back in the 1970s. Installed by injecting foam insulation into wall cavities. This is the way they used to do it. Um, Sometimes you'll see it on an older house where it's balloon framed and they pump it in behind the walls, but it comes down into the basement. And sometimes you'll see this across the bottom. So something to look for when you're doing your inspection if you come across these things. Um, Obviously, they don't use it anymore. A lot of these hazardous materials, they found out over time, they're not good for your health, so they stopped using it. Um, this is some of the stuff that the insulation that has formaldehyde can cause eye irritation, nose and throat irritation, headaches, breathing, etc. Um, yep. When it's installed, that's the biggest potential. But again, if it's moved or disturbed, it's gonna do that. Off-gassing decreases over time. Most older UFI installations no longer produce significant gas. But if it's in there, state the fact. Also, in your pre-inspection agreement, you can state that you're not looking for these things, that they could be there, but you don't want your client to say you can't see behind the wall. When they start taking that wall down, it could be back there. But again, state the fact. You can put it in your pre-inspection agreement that these are things that you're not looking for, but clearly, if you're there, you're going to call them out and bring it to your client's attention. Again, that pre-inspection agreement is important that you send out to know to have your clients know exactly what you're doing and what you're not doing and how you're doing it. Foam insulation may be visible in the attics, basement, behind outlets or wall openings. Um, Laboratory air testing can measure formaldehyde levels. Again, these are all things if you want to discuss with your client to see if they're not comfortable with these certain things. These are ways that they can know exactly what's going on in the house. Um, if it's there and not disturbed, not much to do about it. You're not going to start ripping the wall open and taking it out, but you do want your client to know if it is behind the wall and they're going to do work that it could potentially be a concern. Um, Air quality testing can be performed if concerns exist. Removal is usually not necessary and can be costly. Sometimes they'll just encapsulate it and leave it there if they're not taking down a wall. So you don't know. Now we're getting into lead. Obviously, lead was commonly used in paint before 1978, found in many older homes. Um, Common locations, paint trim, windows, doors, railings, exterior paint, old plumbing pipes, and solder joints used to have lead in it. Um, a lot of times you could tell clearly by looking at this picture, it looks it it kind of disintegrates like that. And if you take a piece of that paint and it snaps between your fingers, it's good indication that it's lead. Um, the latex paints today, they're more, rubbery. They're not going to have this appearance, when you look at it. Um, Again, this is on the outside. If somebody's going to come and paint the house for your client after they buy it, and they say to them, "Oh, you got lead paint. We got to do this, this, and this. We got to scrape it." Again, you want to call these things out, bring it to your client's attention, and state the fact that it's possible lead paint. And for you just yourself, you don't want to be touching this stuff. Um, and don't let it rub against your clothes, that type of thing. So things for you to be aware of as an inspector. Um, the concern for lead, it's toxic, especially to children. A lot of the old lead paints had those bright colors, um, and with kids, um, the concern is that I guess when they get sick from eating it, it has like a sweet taste to it, and it causes them to want to eat more of it. Kind of, kind of weird, but I guess that's the data that came back talking about lead paint. Um, we know as adults we're not going to be putting this stuff in our mouths, but kids, they put everything in their mouths, so that's something to be concerned about. And again, the age of the house, if the house is, you know, built in the 90s or, 2005, you're probably not going to have, you're not going to have lead paint if it's a new house. Um, Lead exposure can cause developmental problems, learning disabilities, nervous system damage. Lead dust is the most common hazard. We have this conversation with our clients that, if you're going to start sanding something and it's possible lead, you got to go about it a different way. Yeah, there you go. Created when paint is sanded, scraped, disturbed during renovation. So you want to bring that to your client's attention. Identification of lead paint can only be confirmed by testing, which all of the hazardous materials we're talking about, the only way to confirm it is by laboratory testing. And then some lead specialists that do this type of testing, they have a type of X-ray machine that they can read into the multiple layers of paint and know that it's lead, and they'll document it, that type of thing. A lot of times people will paint over it and you don't really know because there's latex paint over it. But older houses, some people want to do this testing to know if they have lead paint behind there, especially if you have old plaster walls. It's a good possibility you'll have that. What could be done? Don't disturb the paint, encapsulate paint over it. It's still there, but you are encapsulating it. If you go to take that wall down, that's when it kind of becomes a concern. If you have to remove it, professional removal contractors must follow EPA-led safe work practices. You don't want to just have anybody ripping this stuff down and having it go all over the place. Um, Again, another hazardous uh, concern is carbon monoxide. It's colorless, odorless. We as inspectors have to be careful when we turn on the heating systems and we go down to the basement, or sometimes these these systems are in a crawl space where there's not as much ventilation. So you got to be careful. I know I had this conversation with my team a few times. You should be wearing a carbon monoxide detector on your purse, on your body when you're doing it. Um, Again, safe practice. It's not a bad idea, even if you have a carbon monoxide monitor in your tool bag and the tool bag's with you, kind of to alert you. It's not a bad thing to do. Again, we've had this conversation. Sometimes you just get it, creatures of habit. You just do things and do things, and nothing happens for thousands of inspections. But God forbid it's that one time that you have carbon monoxide in an area where you don't know about it. It's a concern. So something to think about, which I know we've had this conversation with my team. And again, conversations are great. You just have to implement them. And yeah, that's something that we've been talking about doing. So common sources, we talked about furnaces, boilers, water heaters, fireplaces, gas stoves, vehicles, and garages. These are all things, areas that you have to be concerned with. Also, remember that's part of our inspection to look for these monitors if they're not around or in, the proper locations. Take pictures and document it, depending on jurisdictions, how they do it. But just use common sense where carbon monoxide sensors and smoke detectors should be installed. Um, in this case, yeah, you can't have too many. Just redundancy is important. And again, just make the comment. Don't state exactly where they should be. Let them get the proper information from the jurisdictions and the manufacturer where they recommend installing them. Don't tell them to put it in certain areas that you might be leaving yourself open to liability, um, type of thing. So, carbon monoxide, as we know, is a very dangerous and can be fatal. Some symptoms: headache, dizziness, nausea, fatigue, confusion. Um, High levels can cause unconsciousness or death. So, yeah, carbon monoxide. Look for those detectors. Little tip. The carbon monoxide detectors are designed to start turning yellow as they age. So if you go to a house and they yellowed, they're older. They're designed to do that, to change colors. So you know that it's older. So again, take a picture of it, state the fact in there. Um, Recommend that your client, test them as per manufacturer's recommendation, which is pretty much monthly, which I don't know anybody that does it, unfortunately, but they'll chirp when the batteries are low if they have backup batteries. Some houses are hardwired, so different things. So definitely talk about the carbon monoxide and smoke detectors for safety. Um, Prevention: installing carbon monoxide detectors in the home. Keep fuel burning appliances properly maintained. Make sure chimneys are cleaned properly when they're being serviced. If they're used a lot, you don't want to have that build up. Um, Ensure proper chimney and venting systems when you're down in the basement, or wherever the water heater is, a gas-fired water heater or a furnace. You want to make sure that those vent pipes are going up and out at the proper pitch. You want to make sure all the joints are sealed. You definitely don't want to see it back pitched or on a downslope. So just be aware of that when you're doing your inspection. And especially if you're down there and the furnace is running, um, and there's a situation. We've come across multiple times that the water heater vent cover was disconnected, and it was actually emitting carbon monoxide into it. So we just kind of shut it down. And anytime you come across a safety concern in a house, it's our responsibility to identify, to let everybody know, especially in a situation like that, where we've notified the homeowner and stated the fact and made sure if the homeowner wasn't home, that the agents or the listing agent knows what's going on, take pictures, send it to the client. That's stuff that needs to be addressed immediately. You don't want to just turn your head on that. Anything that's a safety concern, you want to call it out right away. Ensure proper chimney and venting, which talked about. Never let vehicles run in garages that are attached to the house. Never use grills or generators inside the home. Going back to the fourth point, we're talking about safety. When you're inspecting the garage, you want to make sure if the garage is attached to the house, make sure that that door going into the house has an automatic closer on it, that it's fire rated. There's no openings in the garage that can let car exhaust fumes get into the house. Make sure there's no vents in the garage, supplying or even just vents running through the garage that can be open and have carbon monoxide going through the house. So when you're doing your garage inspection for safety, just kind of think about those things in the garage. Um, Proper venting, backdrafting, combustion air. If you have gas appliances in the basement or in a room, you want to make sure that they got the proper combustion air, which means that they're taking some outside air into that mechanical room to have the proper mixture of fresh air and with the gas to ignite it. You don't want to be drawing interior air into that space, um, because it's not smart. You want to bring some fresh air in from the outside. Again, smoke alarm, CO monitors, make sure they're all in the locations that they need to be. We don't do full CO testing. Um, if you do it as an ancillary, then you could offer it up. But again, visual looking at it, um, and stating the facts. Mold. Good, good topic of conversation because that always comes up. Houses with potential mold and that kind of stuff. It's just telling you what mold is, type of fungus that grows in, and there's some molds that are very dangerous. Then there's other molds that are surface mold. Like if you go into a bathroom and the grout, or the caulking around the tub hasn't been cleaned properly, you're going to get a little bit of that. And what a lot of people don't realize is that most houses have some type of mold in it, because if you leave your windows open and it's a certain time of the year, there's mold growing outside your house with decaying leaves and just mold spores from the trees, all types of things. So understand that mold there's different types of mold, and they're not all dangerous. They could be irritants, with outside air being, mold, having mold in it. So um, you could have those conversations with your client, because right away people hear mold and it's like, you know, it's a major concern. But not all mold is dangerous. So yep. If you have moisture problems, you're going to have mold. Things aren't ventilated properly, carpets, insulation, ceiling tiles. If people don't maintain the house properly and you got mold, you're going to be able to see it. Again, You'll state the fact, possible mold. Obviously, this picture, we all know it's a type of mold, but we're going to state possible mold. Recommend further evaluation by an environmental specialist. Take your pictures, put your text overs on, communicate it however you do in your report. Very important. Conditions for growth. Mold needs the following to grow: moisture, oxygen, organic material, wood, drywall, dust. We know that. Um, a big area we see a lot, and people tend to not look into it, are these split systems where you have the head up on the wall, and it's if you look inside, usually people don't realize that's an area for possible mold and mildew. We always recommend that they get them serviced and cleaned on a regular basis. A lot of companies will do a deep clean where they'll remove those components on the inside and really give it a deep clean, um, and provide that service, or the homeowner can do it if they're handy. But those are areas that when you're doing your inspection, look in those split systems, and I guarantee you that a majority of the times you're going to see um, that you're going to see mold. It's that simple. So just, explain to your client that it should be cleaned. Um, while they're using it. Just like everything else, just maintenance. Roof leaks, plumbing leaks, basement moisture, flooding, condensation, poor ventilation, all conditions where you're going to allow mold and mildew to grow. So when we do inspections, obviously these are things we're looking for: roof leaks, plumbing leaks, moisture in the basement, poor ventilation. A lot of times you go into the bathrooms, there's no bathroom ventilation system. Call that out, mention it. I know a lot of people are like, oh, but there's a window in the bathroom. Yeah, great. If you're in a cold environment and it's, minus 20 outside, you're going to open that window while you're taking a shower? I don't think so. But again, just state the fact: missing bathroom exhaust fan. That's it. Just state the fact, and then have the conversation with your client on site that it's a potential for mold growth. And then if you don't dry things down and ventilate them and dry them properly, you're gonna have this condition. So identify those areas that potentially can cause mold and call them out. Um, we know mold can cause health problems, possible health effects: allergies, respiration, asthma, eye and skin irritation. Some molds produce uh, mycotoxins. Um, People with allergies and asthma a lot of times get triggered more with those irritants. So you got to be a little bit more conscientious about it when you're doing your inspection. If there's areas that are going to create these concerns, just call them out. Um, Common locations: obviously basements, attics, bathrooms, around windows, under sinks, crawl spaces, behind drywall, around HVAC systems, and obviously anywhere where moisture is present. And it's always in those dark areas where there's not a lot of ventilation and light. You don't really look at it, and over time you get this growth. Um, you'll see it sometimes behind couches. If you look behind there, it's too close to the wall, and it's an older house, and there's a lot of moisture. Houses that don't have air conditioning and in a hot environment, you have those potentials to see that. So something to be, looking at when you're doing your inspections. Mold is often identified by visible growth, musty odors, water damage, or staining. A lot of times, if there's a mold concern, if you look, you'll see it. Um, Stains on the ceiling. A lot of times when we see staining on a sheetrock ceiling, that clearly was water damage. Um, you could almost pretty much bet that on the top of that drywall, there's going to be some kind of mold growth. If you saw the water staining on the bottom side of the sheetrock and there was a leak up top, we always suggest that that section be, cut out and replaced with fresh drywall. And when you open it up, you can look in there more and see if there's any more further mold growth beyond that staining. If it was up there for a long time and just kind of slow drips, where it wouldn't even show up on the sheetrock on the interior side because it's drying before it gets through there, but there is moisture in that cavity, that space that will create mold. So anytime we see staining, especially on sheetrock where you can't see beyond that, we always suggest that that area be, replaced for fresh sheetrock and then further evaluate when you open it up to be able to look in there and know what's going on. Um, Mold testing requires air and surface sampling. Again, if you do mold testing, which can be part of your ancillary inspections, get certified, know what you're doing, and you can offer that service. But you'll have a separate agreement with that, and that's going to be in addition to your normal inspection. And if people want to do it, then it is good ancillary service to provide. Yep. Last sentence, inspectors report visible mold-like growth only. Right. So we're not calling it out as mold. You can use the word biohazard material. You could say possible mold. A lot of realtors get freaked out when you use the word mold, or even your buyers. Um, so you can say biogrowth staining, all different variables that, depending on how you want to communicate with your client, you can use different verbiage. The key to mold control is moisture control. If you don't have moisture, if there's not a moist environment, most likely you're not going to have mold. Fix leaks and water problems, improve ventilation. We talked about that in the bathrooms and kitchen areas. That's where you're going to generate a lot of moisture when you're cooking, boiling stuff on the stove. You're going to get moisture. So ventilation is important in bathrooms and kitchens. And as an inspector, we should look for those areas of concern and document them. If you don't have the proper ventilation in the bathroom, if there's no exhaust fan, call it out and explain what the possible concerns would be. Use dehumidifiers in damp areas. That's obvious, and that's a good choice. Remove and replace heavily contaminated materials. Again, if there's a lot of mold growth, you want to see where it's coming from and um, address it. So, yeah, that's good. Professional remediation may be required for large areas. Yep. Um, there's formulas over a certain amount of square footage. It has to be done by a, environmental specialist. So, yeah, just state the fact. If something's contaminated, I would want to see what's behind it. Remove it, replace it, and see what's going on. Keep the humidity levels below 50%. Vent bathrooms and kitchens to the outside. We kind of talked about that. Maintain gutters and downspouts. Good comment. Um, if gutters and downspouts aren't discharging properly around the outside of the house, you're going to get the water to back up, come through small cracks in the foundation that are common, the settlement cracks, curing cracks. You're going to comment on those things. Again, we're talking about stuff that's going to lead to possible mold. Proper grading around the house, very important when you're doing an inspection. Look at the grading of the house, make sure that the grading is not going towards the house, that it's going away from the house. Um, I always tell my clients, water is the enemy to a house. You don't want it coming in from the foundation or downspouts and gutters that are leaking against the house, but you want everything to be away from the house. Um, all the water in the house, you want it controlled going down drains and out of the house properly. Ventilation and exhaust fans are all important parts of it. Ensure proper grading, repair roof and plumbing leaks promptly. Don't let a slow leak continue or any kind of leak continue because it's only going to cause problems. Use vapor barriers and crawl spaces. If you have a dirt crawl space, it's always good to have a vapor barrier to keep that moisture down underneath the um, um, the vapor barrier, so you're not dealing with that moisture coming up into the living space above. Um, we as home inspectors do not perform mold testing, but if, again, you're going to do an ancillary service, it's something that you can offer to your clients and have a separate agreement, separate pricing, all of that stuff. Us as inspectors, we do look for um, moisture intrusion, water damage, um, those type of things, visible mold growth like we said earlier. Um, if you see it, comment on possible poor ventilation. Um, and if you're a mold specialist, again, you could do that. But yes, a mold specialist is going to have to do that. Okay, we have some videos that we're going to cruise past. And if we have time later, am I correct, AJ? We're not going to go through these videos now, correct?
That's correct. Just reference to them and move on.
Yep. Okay. So again, on the InterNACHI website, if you go to the safe practice course, all these videos are on it. Great to look at. It's part of the course that you do. They're great. We're not going to do it here for time constraints, but the fact that they're there, utilize them. Okay, 14 steps that help inspectors avoid lawsuits. Um, We just talked about the cost with the respirator prior to that. That's for your health and safety. Join InterNACHI. By joining InterNACHI, you're going to lower your risk of lawsuits because you're going to be highly educated. Take the courses just like you're doing tonight. CE classes. AJ mentioned a bunch of classes that are being offered up. Knowledge is power. Just get as much knowledge as you can. And the more you know, we talk about avoiding your lawsuits. I agree with that, but you're providing a level of expertise to your clients that is going to set you apart from other inspectors that are not doing continuing education properly or not taking it serious or not going to InterNACHI websites and videos and stuff like that. Just I can't begin to explain knowledge and experience and time on. If you're a new inspector, connect with a veteran inspector, let that person, teach you the ropes. InterNACHI has great mentorship programs. Take advantage of it. As a member of InterNACHI, you have access to all of that stuff. Highly, highly, highly recommend it. If we're talking about lawsuits here, that's one of the ways to not get yourself jammed up because you could have a veteran inspector that has thousands of inspections under their belt, and if they're willing to take you on and share their knowledge, and AJ is going to share my information at the end. Feel free to call me, text me. Again, I talked about it earlier. We're always driving around as part of being an InterNACHI member. Everybody likes to help one another out. Um, I feel there's no competition out there. There's plenty of business out there for all the good home inspectors to get. Plenty of business. Just learn. I can't begin to tell you. Knowledge is power. Learn. Go to InterNACHI website. Look at the videos. Make sure you get the newsletter. Ben sends out a great newsletter every week. Just all good stuff. Listen to the podcasts. If we're talking about lawsuits, that's my tangent on lawsuits. If you want to avoid them, do that because it's going to explain to you how to do the procedures, how to go through things, how to document stuff, how to help your clients understand what they're buying, and do your job. You're going to avoid lawsuits by doing it that way. So I don't want to go off on more of a tangent on that, but lawsuits, if you incorporate, obviously you're not, personally liable because you're incorporated, S corp, et cetera, et cetera. Just get together with your attorney, or again, this is all stuff that you can find out through InterNACHI. They'll help you. Great professionals in legality, if you want to incorporate S corp, whatever you're doing, reach out. If you go to the InterNACHI dashboard and website, you navigate through it. Everything that we're listing here, you're gonna find on the website. So yeah, number three, take every one of InterNACHI's online courses. I kind of talked about that on um, number one, join InterNACHI, and there you go. That's part of the courses. Never refer to yourself as an expert in your marketing. Very good point. We're home inspectors. We're not, if you're a structural engineer doing a home inspection, you're doing a home inspection as a home inspector. You're not going in as a structural engineer. And if you're um, a engineer or a plumber or an electrician, just understand or let your clients understand it and make sure it's in your pre-inspection agreement. You're going in wearing that home inspector's hat. That's it. You're not, we talked earlier about going above and beyond. Like if you're a plumber, don't start taking the boiler apart and like looking through there in depth that you wouldn't do as a home inspector, but you would do as a plumber. So don't market yourself. You can have the conversation, but make sure everybody understands because I have an engineering background and people talk about it all, okay, no, 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 no. I'm coming in and doing a home inspection, period, end of story. I'm not going to offer up my engineering services. That that's a conflict of interest. I'm coming in as a home inspector and I'm going to recommend if something has to be done by a plumber, an electrician, or a structural engineer, that other independent person does it. Um, so that's important to know if anybody out there is doing home inspections with certain kinds of licenses and stuff like that. That's important to understand. Um, if you're going to hire a helper or expand your business, use contracts. Um, so whoever you're hiring understands exactly their responsibilities and what you're going to provide to them, et cetera, et cetera. Um, I like number six, turn away some customers. If we're talking about lawsuits, then when you get that phone call and you get that client on the phone, you can kind of read between the lines that this is going to be a difficult client. So sometimes it's better to just not get involved. And if you've been doing this a while, you know exactly what I'm talking about. If you're new, don't try to do every inspection out there if you're having doubts about your client. And me personally, I always get on a phone call with my client before I even send out the pre-inspection agreement, before I do anything regarding it. I always set up a time to jump on a phone call. If it's the realtor recommending us or so and so, especially if it's a realtor, I always set up a three-way text and have them communicate, have the realtor make the introduction. And then I always say, uh, hey, Joe, let's jump on a call. I want to go talk to you about the process and all that stuff. And then you can have this conversation and you're almost interviewing your client, which is not a bad thing to do. You can kind of read between the lines and immediately, some of the red flags. And I've gotten these phone calls quite a few times. They're asking about my insurance. Oh, what do you, which is a legitimate question. I can understand because, you want to make sure that us as a home inspectors have the proper insurances. But I kind of guess it's the tone and the other questions that come kind of give you that red flag to say, hey, I don't even want to, I don't want to deal with this person. And then if you're having difficulties on the conversation, can you imagine what's going to happen during the inspection? So don't be afraid to just kind of bow out gracefully and just say, "Hey, listen, it's great talking to you, and I know you want to do it Friday morning at 10 a.m., but I'm not available at that time, and we're kind of booked up for the next 7 to 10 days. I know everybody that's out there doing inspections in this kind of market, everybody wants their inspection done yesterday. So just kind of little ins and outs on that. Turning away clients, using a pre-inspection agreement, paramount. You 1000% should never step on an inspection uh, property without having a pre-inspection agreement signed by a client. Again, InterNACHI has some great pre-inspection agreements. If you're new to the business, take advantage of it, go over it, bring it to your attorney, whoever you're using, and even if you have to pay them to look through it, so they, as attorneys, can make suggestions and guide you in the right direction on how the pre-inspection agreement should be presented to your clients, and make sure that it's signed. If you're carrying insurance and other types of insurance, if you don't have a signed pre-inspection agreement, a lot of insurance companies will not cover you. So it's very, very, very important that you get this signed pre-inspection agreement, especially if you have insurance. If you read the insurance, and the insurance carrier will tell you you have to have a signed pre-inspection agreement for us to cover you. So if you don't have it signed, then you're going to have a problem. God forbid you get a lawsuit. Use warning signs. What that means is if you're going into a crawl space or going on a roof, put signs up. Don't have your clients follow you up a ladder. Don't have your clients come into the crawl space. Just communicate with them, but set the standards. Put a warning sign up, stating, inspector climbing a ladder, whatever you have to do. Please do not enter. Please do not climb, etc. Um, this number 9 is specific to take 3 photos of the water meter before you leave the property, showing that there's no water running and you have everything off. But the photos beyond the water meter are important. When you enter a room, what we like to do is take multiple pictures of the room, ceiling, floors, walls type of thing. And not that it's going to go in the report, but you're going to have record of it. And if your client or somebody says, something about, the ceiling water damaged or stained, how come you didn't see it? And well, here's my pictures, on, this day, here's the pictures of that bedroom ceiling that clearly have no water stains. So, you know, we're talking about avoiding lawsuits. If you have those pictures showing that when you were there was no leak or stain or whatever, you could just show the picture and you're there at time of inspection. It wasn't there. So that's important, to take a lot of pictures in different angles of each room. They don't have to go in the report, but keep them in your library or in your spare photos, in your report writing and stuff like that. So that's important. You can't take enough pictures. Not all of them are going to go in the report, but you'll have them for your reference for the future. Write your reports properly. InterNACHI has a great library of narratives. If again you're new to the business or even a veteran inspector and you want to, hone in on your narratives selections, you can get a lot of that stuff through InterNACHI for narratives on how to word things properly in your report. Number 11 is you can do life expectancies. Um, I don't know if you have to, because a lot of manufacturers and of various mechanicals vary. So it's kind of a gray area. You could put it in there. You could state the fact, or state the life expectancy. Something to think about. Again, it's how you want to do your business. You can't put it in there. I know a lot of people that do. Water heater estimated life expectancy is X to Y. Okay. If people don't maintain it, it's going to fail way before that life expectancy on pretty much everything. Um, not a bad idea. Number 12, to hand out the home inspection maintenance book, which you're going to talk to your clients about how to maintain their house properly. And if they're maintaining it properly and they're doing everything, there's less chance of issues or concerns coming up in the future. Get a survey regarding your inspection to see if there was any issues or concerns that your client might have from your inspection, and just address them. Don't hide behind them if you do a client satisfactory survey. Very important, if you settle on a dispute with a client, get a signed release, which means that if you are, mm, I don't want to say admitting to fault or whatever. Um, Sometimes it's better to just kind of make that payment and get rid of the um, problem, so it doesn't continue to fester and come up numerous times. But again, going back to the pre-inspection agreement, you can do limits of liability where they can only go after you for the cost of the home inspection, or you can put a cap on it and say 2,500. Whatever you're comfortable with, or you want to discuss with your attorney, that's what this is about. And if you do make that payment to them, make sure you get a signed release stating that they can't come back after you if you, um, for whatever reason, paid out on that claim or concern or whatever it is. Um, Again, on the InterNACHI website, you'll see a bunch of, signed release forms that you can give to the client and have them sign it before you make that payment. Don't worry about that. What you wear for safety and professionalism. We talked about it earlier. If you're going in a crawl space, you want to wear proper PPE, or in an attic or in an area that is concerning. Wearing the proper clothes as you present yourself on an inspection, look professional. Have your company name on your shirts, your hats if you wear them. This way you look um, professional. Um, Always arrive in clean clothes. What we do is not a lot of times, we have spare clothes in our car, because if you do multiple inspections in a day, and even if it's a hot day where you're sweating and your clothes might get saturated or stained, just to have a fresh change of clothes in your car that you can change into if you have to, especially shoes. Even if it's raining out and you're getting wet, you go to another inspection, you kind of want to dry yourself up. You don't want to get sick. Dress appropriately for proper type weather and climate. Obviously, wear laced up, rugged shoes. If you're walking roofs, make sure that you got the proper footwear. You don't want to wear sneakers that are worn out and like bolt tires on a car. You'll slip. Wear the proper footwear if you're walking a roof, or even just walking around the exterior of the property. Wear safety shoes. Make sure that you're protecting yourself. Some of the obvious open-toed shoes, sandals, because it's warm out. Um, we never wear shorts on an inspection, regardless of how hot it is, because you don't want to have your legs exposed to, uh, you know, issues and problems, scrapes and nicks and cuts and irritation. So be aware of that. Um, if you're a female inspector, should avoid wearing dresses or heels for safety and practicality. That's kind of common sense. Use a head covering like a baseball cap in dusty or debris areas that have debris. Hard hat. Hard hats are not required, but I know a lot of folks that when they go up in the attic, they'll wear a hard hat because the nails are poking through. Um, and if you pick your head up too high, you can kind of scrape your head, type of thing. I know folks that go into crawl spaces and wear hard hats because they don't want to bang their head. So again, all things that you can um, have with you to protect yourself from these hazards. Personal protection equipment, we refer to it as PPE. We talked about this, crawl spaces, attics, that type of thing, wear the proper PPE, clothing, footwear, headgear, gloves, eyewear, face masks, respirators, all that kind of stuff. Make sure you're protecting yourself. Okay, some dangerous requiring respirators protection include the following. Obviously, if in an area and you see any type of feces in this picture, it's raccoon feces. Was found in an unfinished attic with insulation. Um, I guess that battery is there for a reference for the size and that type of thing. So these are some of the um, issues you can have by going into areas that have these type of concerns. Um, guys can read up on it. But again, proper PPE is very, very important as we talk about safety. Um, Animal droppings, rodent droppings, hantavirus, you can get real sick from it. Um, you're crawling through, you're getting on your clothes, you're going home, you're bringing that type of concern back to your house. Just wear the proper PPE and dispose of it when you're done. Masks, eye goggles, gloves, respirators, all disposable stuff. And when you come out of the crawl space, you throw it in a bag and you're done with it. We talked about signage earlier. Um, that's one of them. It's a great example. If you're on a ladder, inform your clients and other people that might decide to climb up on that ladder. So it's clear as day. When you're on the inspection, set up your ladder with the sign on it, take a picture of it. Again, keep it in you don't have to put it in the report, but keep it in your library that God forbid anything comes up where someone got hurt, they climbed the ladder when they weren't supposed to. Well, there's your signage. Pretty straightforward on that. Various tools that we use to document certain things and be safe. Um, a bunch of stuff, gas detectors, GFCI testers, um, advanced tools, thermal imaging cameras, gas leak detectors, carbon monoxide meters. Again, this is where you're going above and beyond the SOP, but it's whatever you're comfortable with. Um, you have to make the decision on how you're going to run your business. Um, Believe it or not, none of these tools are required to do a home inspection. But if you show up with just your cell phone or camera in your hand and you don't have these type of things, how are you going to identify, GFCI outlets not working properly and that type of thing? But again, it's how you run your business and how you want to do it. Um, Software, report writing software. Um, I can't even begin to go off on a tangent about the proper inspection software. It's the best way and really the only way you're going to communicate with your client after the fact. When you're doing an inspection and you're on site, you know, the client is just their head spinning. It's just a big time. Emotions are running and they only comprehend a small percentage of what you're telling them. How you convey your report in your software and your report writing is, I feel, outside of doing a great inspection, is the most important thing at the end of the day that you're communicating. And whether you want to say, you know, CYA or, protect you from lawsuits or whatever. Me personally, it's doing your job. You're getting paid to do an inspection. Do it to the best of your ability. Just keep on learning and doing all of that education. Um, right here, InterNACHI, inspection library. I know that there's a beta software for InterNACHI. If you remember, I would highly recommend getting involved. Reach out to Ben or whoever's involved in that report writing software. They want us as inspectors to um, use it and make suggestions. And what Ben wants to do is modify the inspection writing software to where it's conducive for us, and it's going to create a great report at the end of the day with the mobile app. Just research it, folks. If you're an InterNACHI member, get on the beta program, do it, become part of it, put your suggestions in, because usually the suggestions are pretty much across the board for certain things for inspectors, or it might even be inspectors don't realize that that's part of the inspection on the software writing and the mobile app. So it's good to share those things, but I highly recommend getting involved with that. Business management tools, scheduling apps, CRM systems, invoicing, account software, all part of the business marketing and stuff like that. Um, get yourself out there to know. But again, avoiding, we're talking about safety, avoiding back injuries, um, use proper lifting techniques, maintain good body mechanics. Um, a lot of it's common sense. Just learn how to do it so you're avoiding injuring your back. Again, another video. Um, what is a ladder? A ladder is an appliance designed for climbing, which consists of two side rails joined uniform intervals, uh, sturdy, rugged, that you can go up and down on. If you're using a ladder, um, make sure it's safe, it's functional. You don't want to use ladders that are damaged or potential um, hazards. Always want to have 3 points of contact on the ladder as you're going up. Don't have phones in your hand, you know, cameras, tools, anything. Just put everything away. Your two hands should be free. Your feet, 3 points of contact. As you go up, you're lifting your foot up, but your two hands are on the side rails. Your foot goes up, your hand, one hand at a time, always 3 points of contact. Um, follow basic guidelines on ladders. Choose the right equipment. Ladders should be checked. Choose ladders that are right height for the job. You'll see ladders are rated. Just a lot of common sense if you look at it. Never tie two ladders together to go up. If you're going up on a roof and you're using a ladder, tie it off on the gutters or clamp it, something where it's not going to slide. Foot it properly on the bottom. If you're going up and the client's there or the agent's there, just asking them to put their feet on the bottom, kind of help you do that. So just be very careful. The ladder videos that we saw over here, highly recommend going back into the course material and watching that. Um, OSHA requirements for ladders. Again, we're not sanctioned by OSHA, but OSHA is a good um, gauge how to be safe. Proper angles. You want to do a 4-to-1 angle. We always like to put our feet on the bottom rung, put our hands out. If our arms are extended straight out and we could touch it, that's usually a good rule of thumb for the proper angle on the ladder. Common sense, just kind of look at it and you'll see you don't want it too steep or too much of a slope where it can slide out on the bottom. Don't forget, everybody, if there's a lot of activity on the chat, throw it into the Q&A. So if there's a question, AJ can bring it up at the end. Um, Questions are good. So moving along, setting up and using a ladder. Obviously, we talked about that earlier. Make sure it's properly secured. Make sure it's in the right position as you navigate up and down. You just want to be careful with that. Okay, so let's do plays. We're halfway through. All right. So obviously, metal ladders by electricity. You want to be careful, maintain safe distances, keep ladder and yourself at least 10 feet away from overhead power lines. Just be careful. Look up and around when you're setting up a ladder. Another great video that Ben did. We're not going to show it tonight, but highly recommend going to the actual course and look up these videos. Again, we talked about knowing what knowing what to do and when to do it. These are all great videos. We don't have time to do them tonight, but again, all good stuff. If you walk on a roof, fall protection demonstration, great stuff. Safety tips for inspectors and homeowners. Never leave a raised ladder unattended. Place a ladder in front of a door that is not locked or blocked or guarded. Use a ladder at any purpose other than one of which it was designed. In other words, a ladder is used to climb. That's what you use it for. We talked about a lot of this stuff. If it's windy out, be careful. Exceed the maximum load rating. If a ladder is not rated for the amount of weight that's going up, you want to be knowledgeable of that. Make sure the ladder is secure. Tie offs, always bring a lot of tie offs. We talked about that. If you're setting it up when you're going up on the roof, tie it off to the gutter. Um, I've heard stories where inspectors went up on the roof by them. They were a solo practitioner and they were up on the roof and the wind blew the ladder down and they had no way of getting off the roof. So make sure it's tied down and secured. So minimum risk of embarrassing yourself. Again, we talked about footwear. These are a lot of things out in the market that you can wear that help your traction. Obviously, if you have a slate roof and ceramic tiles, you're not going to really walk it. But again, state the fact why you didn't walk it and so on. Gaining access to the roof. Once you decide to walk the roof, accessibility. Picture on the left. Never put the ladder in that situation on the slope roof there. That's wrong. Put it in the front, tie it off, spot it, put a heavy planter in front of the bottom if you're by yourself, something to secure yourself so you're not having a problem. Fall arrests. These are tie offs that you would tie yourself to. Um, these are more for roofers, but again, safety is paramount. If you're going to walk a roof and you want to tie yourself off, you have to get into this type of situation. Alternatives to walking a roof, you can use a camera pole, you can use a drone. Well, we'll go into that next slide. You can video it from the ground. These are all good examples of how you can inspect a roof without walking it. Drones. If you're flying a drone, just make sure you're licensed to fly the drone. You don't want to get jammed up. Learn how to fly a drone. Practice, 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 practice flying the drone before you use it on your inspection. Case in point, when we go on inspections, I don't fly the drone. I let my son fly it because the few times that I tried practicing with it, I crashed it and damaged it. So I'm out. So he does it. As you saw in the earlier slides, he walks most of the roofs, but we're there together. We're a multi-inspector firm, so we always go out on inspections with two people. Um, I think that should be a totally separate class and webinar and CE class, multi-inspector. inspections, but we'll talk to AJ and we'll set that up. But that's my situation. Learn how to fly the drone. You don't want to be on an inspection and fly a drone and crash it and be embarrassed and not get the proper stuff. You want to look professional. Um, Another video. We talked earlier about cement siding that potentially can have asbestos in it. Um, that's the era that it was used, understanding the health and hazards of asbestos. We talked about that earlier in the class. How to identify it, call it out. And again, it's going to be possible asbestos containing material. So you don't want to call it out as asbestos because you're not testing it. Lead paint, we talked about that earlier. There's a perfect picture of lead paint, how it cracks and peels to look like that. So we all know that 99.99% of it, that's lead. But again, you have to call it out as potential. We talked earlier about the hazards. Um, uh, Lead water mains. We as inspectors, it's important to identify the water main that's coming in the house because if it's lead, you don't want to miss it because again, we're talking about safety, environmental concerns, etc. You want your client to be aware of that they have a lead water main. Um, so again, call it out depending on how you elaborate about the fact that it's a lead water main. Most people understand the hazards of lead, so it's important that we call it out. Heating systems, we talked about proper venting. If vents are disconnected and you got flue gases coming into the living space, it could be a concern. Um, Again, if we're on an inspection and any of these items come up, just document it. If it's a safety concern, let the people that own the house know about it. A lot of times people don't know that they have these concerns. Um, I would definitely call it out. Again, the middle picture is a limitation. An attic that has no flooring, it's going to be difficult to walk. Again, state the fact, put it in your report, and move on. Gas-fired combustion appliances. We talked about that earlier. Um, Heat and combustion, gas-fired appliances. Common examples include furnaces, boilers, and water heaters. Fuel source, leak or improper combustion caused. We talked about combustion air. We talked about a lot of this stuff already. Um, Important to know that. Gas-fired wall, floor heaters, and oil-fired appliances. Common in older homes in areas where the weather's colder. Um, Most issues we see are from lack of maintenance, um, just not maintaining things causes a lot of problem. Hot surfaces, floor heaters are less common, but again, are a safety concern. Electric heating systems, oil-fired combustion appliances such as fires are generally safe to inspect, but the main safety concern for inspectors is the risk of fire. Um, Pretty straightforward. Um, you don't want to turn gas valves on if they're off. We talked about that earlier. Again, another great video. PPE, we talked about that earlier. Safety glasses if you're going into areas, opening up electrical panels, gloves, boots. Always make sure you got rubber soled shoes on when you're working on an electrical panel. A lot of times we're very conscientious of entering a house and having muddy, dirty shoes. We put our booties on. Um, Me personally, I like to take my shoes off. Um, and go about the inspection with my shoes off. I hate those booties, but a lot of times you put those booties on, and if you're got snow or water, a lot of times it'll leak through those booties that are not waterproof, and you're gonna track mud and water all over the house. But More importantly, if you take your shoes off when you do the electrical panel, make sure your shoes are back on for that particular part of the inspection. You don't want to be part of the circuit. You want to isolate yourself. Um, Voltage tester, you want to check to see if you have electricity on certain things. The electrical panel, before you open it, you want to verify that there's no stray electric. You want to make sure that the panel's not energized. Here we're using a voltage detector. You can use the back of your hand to kind of touch it to the panel. This way, if the panel's live, you'll get a little bit of tingling, but your hand will contract away from the panel. Never take your open palm and put it on the panel. Before you open the panel, just make sure it's not live. Removing panel screws. You can go to a panel and you can see that they're sheetrock screws, they're pointed. Just be careful when you take them out because sometimes they'll short out. Um, it happens. Just be careful. If you take the panel screw off and it's that picture on the left, it's sharp, pointy, put it in your report, document it. A lot of times, if you're lucky to take that screw out and you don't have a situation, before you put the panel cover on, make sure there's no wires in that area that you're putting the screw back in because you don't want to short that wire out. Or um, don't put the screw back in if you think it's going to short out the circuit in that particular area, but you obviously have to resecure the panel and just call it out and address it. Very important part when you're talking about safety with the panel screws. The screw on the right on the third picture is obviously the one that you want to not have a sharp point to it. Again, then once you get in there, if you're removing the dead front cover, the panel cover of the electric, um, insulated screwdriver, visual inspection only once removed. We talked about this earlier. Don't stick your hands in there. If you see double taps, scorched marks, those are things you're going to report on. Inspecting the panel interior, again, removing the dead front cover to avoid contact with the energized components. Be careful not to hit the breakers where you dislodge them. Very important if you come across the old Federal Pacific or Bulldog panels, you got the orange coloring on the breakers. Don't remove that panel. This is an older Zinsco panel. You can see the different color breakers. Again, it's a split system where they're outdated. They don't use these anymore, so you'll call them out. Um, you have two feeders going to the panel. It's called a split system. Again, if you take the electrical course, you'll learn about all of this stuff. But just be aware of these things as you're going through your inspection. Um, there you go. Just the screws again, dead front cover. We got that. Confined spaces. If it's defined as a confined space, you don't enter it. You don't have to enter it. And a confined space is if it's too small or you don't have immediate access out of it, don't go in it. It's that simple. Permits required to confine spaces. A lot of this here is on the commercial side of it. We do a lot of commercial inspections and we come across these things and we just take a picture and document it. We don't go in there because it clearly states confined space, entered by permit only. Usually there's nobody on site to give you permission. Take a picture, know what's in there, document it, and move on. We talked about attic inspections. Um, Make sure you're in a safe environment. If you go up and there's a bunch of loose fill insulation, you don't want to walk through that attic and potentially, you know, falling through it or disturbing the materials that are up there. Again, just document it and move on. Attics hazards, we talked about that earlier. We talked about, I know a lot of inspectors that wear hard hats going up into the attic because the second picture you can see the nails coming through. Okay, I kind of like that. Do we do it? No, but it's something that you might think about when you're going in an attic. If you're popping your head up too high, um, you can get poked. So something to think about. Attic pull downstairs. Make sure when you pull them down that they're secure. You know, this one looks pretty good. A lot of times you get the old wooden rickety ones that are unsafe. Again, if you can't get up there, document it. Show a picture of the unsafe ladder. Don't go up into it if you think you're gonna hurt yourself. Crawl space cellars and other confined spaces. Again, if you can't get in there, document it, take a picture, put it in there. If it's not safe or not big enough to get in there, just document it. Unseen hazards, metal ductwork, and lot of times you're in an attic, you might reach over a metal duct that might be energized and you become part of the circuit. So just be aware of your surroundings when you're doing these inspections. And again, if it's unsafe, just document it. Um, Hazards of inspections where there's hydroponic systems. Obviously, now you got water and you got electric, and we all know that water and electric is not a good situation. But again, take pictures, document it, why it's unsafe, state the facts, and document it with your pictures. And these are just some examples of what the potential risks are. Um, Licensed electricians for any of this stuff that you have, you're growing indoor plants or whatever you might be growing indoors that needs water and electric and lights, that type of thing. Just, if it's unsafe or you look at stuff that bare wires are exposed, just again, document it. That's one of the items that might be growing in a house that you might come across. Again, no comment, just state the fact. Um, Meth labs. Hopefully, you kind of know this situation before you get involved and think about the scope of work that you might not want to get involved in. And again, going back to the very beginning of the presentation, know your audience, know your client, have a nice conversation with them on the phone before the inspection, and just kind of get some information. A lot of times they'll say, hey, yeah, I'm buying this house, but it was a meth lab. And well, think about it. I'm out on this, but you make the executive decision here. Um, Inspecting after an emergency, we came across a lot of situations, and we're up in the Northeast after Hurricane Sandy, a lot of houses that were structurally compromised, electrical wiring that was sitting in water. You can come across this in a crawl space. Again, if you're inspecting a house that's been involved in a catastrophic event, hurricane or flooding, just kind of um, know what you're getting into. Um, Same thing, inspecting after an emergency. If you really have to inspect it and there's water and stuff, the electric might be off or might be smart to keep it off. So again, understand what you're getting into before, and it all comes back to having that conversation with your client before you step foot on property. Animals, obviously, that's a concern when you're on an inspection. If you come across dogs, um, some might be friendly in the beginning, but you make a wrong move or a certain way. Um, we had situations where animals that seemed friendly all of a sudden turn. So your level of comfort, if you don't want to inspect a space where there's a dog or go into a house, state your fact, document it, and move on. Um, some of the potential hazards when you enter a crawl space or an attic, different kinds of insect bites, specific to your area. Just know what you have potentially in your area. Snakes, depending on your location, where you're at. Know that there's potential hazards and risks um, going through um, certain areas that you might be encountering snakes and that kind of stuff. So um, know the area you're in, crawl spaces might be harboring snakes or any kind of stuff. And this is kind of a map showing the area of where there might be potential snakes. We're up in the Northeast. We did an inspection a couple of months ago, and there was, a garden snake slithering across the basement. Okay. He went about his business, went into the trap area and disappeared. Took a picture and we stated it, but we didn't have to encounter any of that stuff. Now we're getting into an area that if an accident happens while you're doing an inspection, what do you do? If you're by yourself, how you go about it. So, something for everybody to think about. If you're a solo inspector doing inspections by yourself, um, I would highly recommend being in communication with somebody that is not obviously if you're on the inspection by yourself, um, you might want to text somebody or do something every 15 minutes to say, hey, I'm here, I'm good, or notify somebody that you're going into a crawl space. Um, I don't know. Just you have to think out of the box if you're a solo inspector. Um, you might be doing an inspection on a house that has squatters, and you're not aware of it, but you're by yourself. You might be going into bad neighborhoods. Something to think about as a solo inspector. We don't have to worry about that because we always go out with two inspectors. So um, that's where our business plan and our business is set up. If you're not, just think out of the box how you can keep yourself safe. Um, and again, if you're showing up to an area that you're not comfortable with, don't get involved in the situation that you're going to put yourself at risk. Um, Something to think about. How you go about your business and how you proceed with your inspections. Um, uh, if you have a broken bone, fracture is a broken bone, it requires medical attention. If you're by yourself, how do you go about this? It's funny because I did an inspection by myself a few months ago because the guys were out on inspections and it was for a client that was buying the house. It was in a safe area, but nobody was there. And it was weird. I felt very uncomfortable. I was in the house by myself. There was nobody around. There was no agents. Um, Very rarely, I could probably tell you it's two or three times that I've ever done it, where I was the only person at the house without a real estate agent, with a buyer, with a seller, or anybody. And it's a very uncomfortable feeling. I didn't like it. Um, and I choose not to do it in the future, but this was a unique situation, and I kind of did it. It was fine, but I felt uncomfortable being in the house by myself. God forbid I tripped and fell and I got hurt and I couldn't communicate with anybody. But I was in contact with my son, so he knew where I was, and every 15 or 20 minutes, hey Chris, I'm good. You know, everything's good, everything's going smooth. FaceTime them, whatever you have to do to be safe. I can't stress that enough, especially if you're a solo practitioner and you're going on inspections by yourself, and nobody's around. So just something to think about. Another video, cruise past that. Um, Electrical burns, if something happens, you want to have um, first aid kits available. I'm going to share a personal life experience that happened just a few weeks ago. And a lot of times, as inspectors, we take things for granted. Um, don't. We talked about carbon monoxide sensors and all this other stuff. So we were on an inspection, and it was a very big house, high-end house, really nice house. So it was me, my my son. There were three of us. So we conquer and divide. We always have walkie-talkies, especially if you're a multi-inspected firm and you're going out on two inspections. If you're going on inspection as two inspectors, have walkie-talkies where you can communicate with one another. God forbid of a situation, kind of like we were talking about a few minutes ago. But what happened was we we always say have a first aid kit with you. Yeah, that's great. That's common sense. And the majority of the time, the first aid kit is in your car. Okay, get it. Been doing this many, 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 many years. And that's where my first aid kit is. But what happened was I was down the basement and I was removing the cover for the main house trap. And it was heavy, it was steel, it was difficult, and it was in a very awkward position. So what happened was as I pulled the cover up, I ran my knuckles across the bottom of the concrete, and it ripped up my knuckles. And I was bleeding. I was bleeding, pretty good for a scrape. So I'm like, okay, I'm down the basement. Now this is a really high-end house, finished, you know, beautiful. Now I'm down the basement and my knuckles are bleeding. So inadvertently, I did not have a first aid kit downstairs with me in the basement. So now I'm bleeding all over the place. I didn't even have paper towels in my tool bag. So it led me to believe, I'm like, oh my goodness. So I had to use my walkie-talkie and say, hey guys, can you bring me down paper towels? Because I didn't want to go up out to my car while my knuckles were bleeding to drip blood all over the place or wrap it in my shirt. So food for thought, again, we didn't have, I didn't personally have that stuff. I didn't have that stuff with me to to keep myself from, bleeding all over the place. So just kind of simple things like that, that, maybe have bandages or, you know, something there that if you have to, you know, stop the bleeding or go out to your car and not drip blood all over the place. So literally this happened to me a couple of weeks ago, and I want to share that with you folks because it happened, but something to think about. Um, Again, electrical burns, you're gonna take care of it, maintain it, um, put antiseptic on it, um, wrap it up so you don't have those that situation. Um, that's electrical burns, um, puncture wounds, same thing. God forbid something happens to you on an inspection, you want to be able to take care of it on the spot, clean it, stop it from bleeding. You don't want to have um, infection set in. So going back to wearing the proper footwear, you don't want to wear, you know, sneakers if you're in a situation where there's nails or construction debris. and that kind of stuff. So um, treat it, cover it, disinfect it, so you don't wind up getting hurt. Severe bleeding, obviously, call 911 immediately. If you have an injured person, it might not be you, it might be somebody on site. I don't know, but again, safety, how to go about it. If there's severe bleeding, call 911. Elevate the way, wear gloves and remove visible dirt. Apply direct pressure using a sterile bandage. Maintain firm pressure at least 20 minutes, etc. Um, Severe bleeding. If you suspect internal bleeding, seek emergency help. Signs of internal bleeding may include bleeding from body cavity, um, vomiting or coughing up blood. Um, Quite the obvious. Um, Animal bites. Um, Safe. We talked about that earlier. Safety around animals. Um, Inspect safely before entering enclosed spaces. We talked about that. Be prepared. Wear gloves, long sleeve shirts, and boots. Long sleeve shirts are good to wear. Irritation, if you're going through the house and there's loose insulation, you might rub up against it. At least it's on your clothes, not your skin. Listen and look for signs of animals. If you go into a house and there's a dog in the backyard and they're barking their head off, I wouldn't enter into the yard while the dog is there. Talk to the homeowner or the agent or somebody there. And if for some reason you don't feel comfortable entering that backyard because the dog's barking like crazy and no one's giving you access to it, again, take pictures, document it, state the fact, um, and and tell your client, hey, we can't get in the backyard. And if your client's there with you, they're going to understand and see firsthand what's going on. Um, Obviously, common sense, if there's a dog there, in order to prevent getting bit, never corner or touch animals, respect pets, announce yourself when entering a room. If the door's closed and the dog's barking, I just wouldn't go in there. You don't have to announce anything and go forward with anything that you're concerned with. What's the next one? Snakes. Um, Snake bites, certain areas. Um, I guess if you get bit and you're not aware of it, you know, you have to address it. Just be aware that if you're in an area where there's snakes or stuff like that, that you don't want to enter into um, that situation. Bee stings. If you get stung by a bee, um, remove the stingers immediately. If there's no need to scrape off the bee stingers, just remove them. Biggest thing is with bee bites, if you're allergic to it, um, you if you know you're allergic to it, you should be carrying an EpiPen or some form of medicine that if you get bit and you're highly allergic to it, that you can um, address these situations. Obviously, if there's a beehive and there's bees swarming, just again, take a picture, state the fact, and get out of there. Um, bee stings. Um, Most people aren't allergic to it. It's going to be more of a mild, annoying type of thing. So you want to address it. Again, maybe you have some uh, Benadryl ointment in there and you put it on, clean it out, disinfect it, type of thing. Yeah. Um, Common issues if you get stung by a bee. If the stinger's left in the skin, it continues to release that venom and stuff that the bees stinging you with to, to cause harm to you or their prey. So that's a picture of what might happen if you get stung by a bee and it swells up. Um, Localized pain, allergic reaction, hives, difficulty breathing. That's more of a severe reaction. Um, Multi-stings increase risk of severe reaction. Obviously, if you get stung multiple times, it's a bigger concern um, with that. So again, be precautious. Again, uh, long sleeve shirts. If you have a long sleeve shirt, you got less chance of less risk of getting bitten through your clothes. If you're going into a confined area, long sleeve is going to help. Again, PPE, and don't get yourself in a situation where if you see bees swarming in hives, just take pictures, walk away. Don't be around it, especially if you're highly allergic to any of that stuff. Um, as inspectors, remove stinger immediately. Scrape it off. Don't squeeze it. You don't want it. You don't want that venom or you know poison going into your body. Just kind of scrape it off. Clean the area and apply cold compresses to reduce the swelling. Again, a lot of things that you think about. You can carry those ice bags that when you crack them, they're activated to be cold, and you can apply it to the affected area and reduce um, swelling and soothe it, type of thing. So, monitor for allergic reaction. We talked about that earlier. Seek emergency care if symptoms escalate. That would be, aggressive swelling, um, difficult breathing, that type of thing. You want to really go about getting medical attention as soon as possible. And again, something to think about if you're by yourself, how do you address these concerns that potentially can come up if you're doing an inspection? So stuff to think about and take away from our presentation tonight. Just want everybody to think worst case scenario and just protect yourself. Like I said, when I got cut a couple of weeks ago, it never happened before. It happened first time in ever, and I'm like, I can't believe I'm in this situation. It's just kind of dumb. We talked about having the CO monitors on us. Again, you don't want to wait to have a situation that is problematic that you didn't think about before. Um, Minor cuts and scrapes. Obviously, you want to stop the bleeding immediately. Clean the wound, thoroughly clean the wound to reduce risk of infection. Um, Apply antibiotic ointment. So, the takeaway here, when that situation happened a couple of weeks ago, now my tool bag that I carry around with me throughout the inspection has gauze, peroxide, um, um, Neosporin cream, bandages, and stuff that I can address it right on the spot. You want to clean it immediately, cover it, disinfect it, put an antibiotic ointment on it, cover it, wrap it up, and hopefully you can continue with your inspection. If it's deep, then you need medical attention. You have to call off the inspection and go about what you have to do. Again, stuff for everybody to think about as we move through our inspection career. Minor cuts and scrapes. Um, what it does well. First aid can prevent infection and promote healing. Yes, we talked about that. Simple, simply cleaning and removing dirt and bacteria and debris. You don't want to have uh, infections set in. So again, think about carrying this stuff with you and cleaning it immediately and doing what you have to do. Bandage protects the wound from further injury and more contamination. A lot of a lot of stuff that we should think about while we're doing our inspections. Most minor wounds heal quickly with proper care. Understood. Um, Common issues: dirt, debris left in wound can lead to infection. Uh, yep, common sense. Not cleaning properly before covering. You don't want to cover a wound that is dirty and has bacteria and stuff. So clean it first to the best that you can. Using dirty, inappropriate bandages. Common sense. Ignore signs of infection. If you get cut and it's starting to get infected, seek medical attention. Again, repeating ourselves, treat all minor wounds immediately, clean, disinfect, and cover. Always check for debris before bandaging. I guess we're talking about if there's a bee stinger in there, take it out before you cover it, or if you know, you scrape your knuckles on a dirty floor or a rusted, you know, piece of metal, clean it as best you can, um, cover it, use bandages. And if you need to seek medical attention because it's severe, then absolutely. So, AJ, I believe this is the last slide. So, I think we have some questions that we can jump on to kind of. So, basically, the takeaway from this whole presentation tonight is to be safe out there, to um, make sure you get home safely. Again, if you're a solo practitioner, um, think about communication, especially if you're doing an inspection by yourself and nobody's going to be in the house and nobody's going to be around, or you might be going into a bad area, or just precarious situations. Just communicate, or honestly, just don't do it. Step away. Your safety is the most important thing. Getting home to your family at night, being safe. It's not. It's not worth. It's not worth your safety and being involved in a situation that is bad. So again, I would definitely consider that. Or uh, my takeaway from all of this is if you can pair up with someone in the field that you can collaborate with and and do inspections together. It seems like I always go off on this tangent on every time I teach. It's smart. It's For me, it's lended itself to be a great business practice moving forward with how we do it and what we do it. How, like I said, how we do it and how our approach. Because if you're a two inspection team, you can kind of market yourself on the inspection and get more business. We talked about ancillary services that you can do. I feel the best ancillary service when you're on an inspection is you know, sharing your knowledge, your expertise. And if you're by yourself, you can't really do that. But if you're with somebody that you're sharing the responsibility and the inspection and really thoroughly doing it, we were talking about lawsuits and stuff like that. Me personally, my best insurance is another set of eyes from a qualified home inspector that knows what they're doing, and it's just extra eyes, extra communication, um, double checking one another, being thorough, and that's going to lead to more inspections in the long run because you have a captive audience. You have the listing agent, the selling agent, you have your buyers. Inadvertently, we're all inspectors. The buyers always bring other family members. You have the sellers of the house, so you can market yourself by doing a good job and being able to communicate with that. So that's my takeaway, especially if we're talking about safety. Um, it's a good thing to think about. That's my takeaway, especially if we're talking about safety.